You know what is funny actually? Just fact-wise, Africa has about 15 elections every year, the most by far in the whole world. And I think people forget those facts, which are very important, so I can answer your question. You see, if you look at Asia, has almost the same number of countries as Africa, but democracy-wise, we have 15 elections on average every single year. When you do something over and over, you perfect it. You learn from your mistakes and you improve it. Okay, so for the most part, the reality is democracy was a Western import, and we had to fine-tune it and make it work for ourselves. The principles, of course, are universal to an extent, but we had to make it localized democracy for us. So the beginning stage is just like a child when he's born. You stumble and you fall and you get up. You stumble, you fall, you crawl. But I think Africa is showing the world how democracy ought to be done. And as a matter of fact, to quote the Swiss ambassador last year, actually this year when he told me, when after watching the Kenya election, I was with him in Bomas, and he told me, Commissioner, I think we have something to learn from what we have seen what you guys do. Okay, because we've seen it all. The worst, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then we've learned from mistakes. So generally speaking, Africa is leading the world and showing the world how democracy ought to be done. You can tweak a few things, localize it, and it can actually work. So I think that's my take in it. And last but not least, for me, Africa having been the laughing stock for a long, long time, now we're showing the world actually how to do it. And if you talk to observers, especially international observer missions, they're quite actually impressed. The level of transparency, there's still challenges, of course, but they're actually majority of them are very impressed by what we're doing and what we're doing across Africa. That, one, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you choose to do what is right, you can do it. And you should do it. Because there's always many forces, it's a political process, that will try to subvert, to change. But generally speaking, where there's a will, there's a way, and actually you can do what is right. You can stand for what is true and what is right. And also, people should be given time to grow and mature. See, the challenge we've had is for a long time, the standards set for us as African countries have been democracies which have been established for 200 years. So we want to be like the US right now. They've been done it for 20 something years, or the Brits. Okay, so what I can say is we've grown, we've come to the world stage now. We can play in the big league, okay, in the major league, so to speak, to the poor American phrase. And to me, that's what we did. We actually did it. And for everybody who saw what we did, everybody who participated, they can take that lesson that whatever we did can be replicated and applied everywhere in the world. So from our perspective, one was resources. So you have a mandate, you have a clear mandate to do, and you're required to do so much with so little. And we had to find really creative ways to go about it, because the stakes are extremely high. To us, especially as a commission, I consider it an existential threat in the sense that the commission was established to prevent election violence out of what happened in 07, 08. So if we had any form of violence, then our relevance will be questioned. So we had to be creative because we had zero chance of failure. We couldn't make excuses. I don't make excuses. I can't say, well, the reason we didn't do X, Y, and Z is because we don't have this. When lives are lost, nobody cares about your excuses. So you gotta do what you're supposed to do, and we're creative. I'm grateful we got a lot of partners like ICARES, UNDP, really came through for us in the time of need to so that we can actually deploy and employ a roadmap so that at least we can have the election that we had, which was peaceful. The NCIC mandate is quite broad. In law, NCIC Act over 8 amended in 2019 spells about 17 mandates that we have, and specifically when it comes to election, of course, is making sure there is peace. Kenyans are cohesive, are united. And fundamentally, people forget elections or democracy by itself is divisive because it divides people. You have to choose between A or B. But then we tell people, no, you have to be together. But then you're told you gotta be on this side or that side. So bringing just people together was our mentor. So prior to election, I remember this one time, I had gone to Isiolo, and I was mediating some conflict there between two communities, the Turkanas and the Meru. And I was talking to the Turkana warriors and their elders. And after I persuaded them not to pursue the way of violence, one of the warriors stands up and says, you know what, you will call you, they call me in the Turkana language, giraffe. I think, if I remember, it's called a Kori. So I was perplexed, why are you calling me a giraffe? Because, I thought my favorite animal is the cheetah, at least a lion, so I can be brave. But they called me a giraffe, and I wondered why. And he explained, because I asked him, why he called me a giraffe? I said, why? Well, because as much as you're young, a giraffe is the tallest animal in the African savannah. And because of its height, it's able to see very far. I'm like, interesting. And you're able to see many things and to articulate it and do what needs to be done. Actually, that's what it means. In Greek, the word Sophia means one who's able to look at the sky and order their footsteps according to that. And we'll do that. When we became commissioners, we tried to, as much as, have foresight. What can happen? Two scenarios: the worst, the good, and the bad, and really make sure it doesn't. We don't descend into violence and chaos as we've done in the country. So what we did was we developed a roadmap called the Roadmap to Peaceful Election of 2022, called Election Bila Norma. That was the tagline, which became really famous, and actually everybody used it, which is a good thing. We had that roadmap, and we established the challenges that our country faces. We're very objective. Why do we always fight? So there's 6 reasons why we always fight. And then we looked for 6 interventions, strategic interventions, to counter the 6 reasons which we fight. And each of them, we made sure at least we did 5. The 6th one was long-term, the structural issues that the country has. We didn't have time to really address them. So that's what we did. So we deployed the roadmap, and we did so many things, including engaging other government agencies, stakeholders on the ground, building resilience, especially in the grassroots. Because what we realize is if the grassroots, there's resilience, no matter what comes, they can be able to withstand the shock or the incitement. And we did that, especially in communities where we know there's fault lines, where they've fought in the past. We did a hotspot mapping, and then we went to those communities and really spent a lot of time. So some places where there are 17 times. There is a region, the Nandi-Kisumu border, where there are 30-something times. The Nandi-Kakamega border, we're like 27 times. We spent time on the ground. We engaged with the politicians, the real troublemakers sometimes, and what we realize is when you sit down and engage with them, actually they listen to you. Okay. Then we had this all-government approach where we worked with every other government agency, of course with the IBC. We're very almost tied in the hip with IBC, the National Police Service, the judiciary, the DCI, to make sure there's no loophole when it comes to law enforcement when people are inciting or engaging in hate speech. Make sure that is effective. But something also which we did now, which reminded me of that young boy who told me I'm a giraffe, was we planned and deployed a very sophisticated media plates, because we realized you fight fire with fire. So we were there campaigning for peace. We were in the grassroots. We were on TV, on radio, on social media. We were everywhere you can imagine. We deployed a lot of resource to make sure peace is everywhere, and it's owned. So Kenyans owned that message. It became theirs. So it's not us saying, well, you gotta be peaceful. We have to be peaceful. So after that, we realized we've done also what we could have done given the resources. During the elections, one of the things we did, of course, we were observers. I was in Nairobi, in charge of Nairobi, and specifically Bomas, working very closely with IBC. And I was there every single day, almost every single hour, at night, daytime, working, especially with IBC commissioners as the chairman, and I know exactly what transpired, blow by blow. And for us, we are there for a second reason, which is our mandate, is to advise government. So we advise government. We sit and say, okay, this is what you should do. this was should do, and the IBC was very amenable to what I was advising, and because the stakes were very high, because we had violence in '07 because of how the elections was called. So how it was called was very important. So that's why I had to be very, 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 very close with them and watch. And I'm glad they gave us absolute unprecedented access to them, to their system. So we knew everything what was happening, and we tabulated ourselves. And we knew where the truth was. And after election, now the real work actually started, because that's usually the problem. So a lot of shuttle diplomacy, a lot of engaging the key stakeholders, the principals, to maintain peace. No matter what happens, just wait, to observe the rule of law, because it's not happenstance. Sometimes you have to remind them, you gotta talk to them. We learned earlier that you engage politicians, it works. So even after, if you engage them, the principals, and I'm grateful even through the international community, the observer missions that were here and the diplomatic corps, they would collectively all put enough, I don't say pressure, but engagement to make sure that both parties remain. The most challenging part was the week after election and before it was announced. I mean, that was, to me, the craziest part. Really trying to engage the country, tell them, you know what, you can't call the election. Wait, the tension, we all saw the tension and the drama. And back and forth, that's what, at that time I was in Bombers, and we were still behind the scenes engaging the political class, the leaders, doing back and forth diplomacy just to make sure that when Monday comes, as it came, they call it and we have a peaceful election. Wow, that's a story for days. I think I'm going to write a book about bombers. First of all, let me put it this way to give context. I think the world was watching, the whole country was watching, Africa was watching. And if what people saw had happened any other time, let's say 3-4 years, we'll have had serious chaos in our country, serious conflict. But the fact that what happened did not cause violence or chaos is testament to the efforts we had put in, a lot of people had put to make sure there's peace. What happened in Bombers, I can tell you, especially on Monday, I don't think anybody could have foreseen that. Okay. And I'm not sure I could give all the details, but generally speaking, this is a challenge you have, especially in this part of the world. And that's why I say we're still growing as a country. So numbers are coming in, they're being transmitted, and those who are, we had an API, of course, we're doing the tallying, and people are doing the tallying. And in short, what we started seeing was interference. Okay, it's nothing short of interference. Okay, there was political interference to try to subvert the will of the people. Okay, regardless of how you call it, there was interference. That's a fact. External parties and forces were trying to interfere within the IBC and how they conduct their elections. They should begin their space and call it as they ought to. But there's a lot of pressure and interference for them to change or basically just interfere with the process. And what you saw, especially on, first of all, there was a couple of things happening in Bombers. There was, on Saturday night, you saw the floor being breached a couple of times. Okay, what seemed random, okay, wasn't. It was well planned and calculated. And the peak of it, the apex of it, was what you saw on Monday. Okay, whereby even the entire dais was breached and there was chaos and there was confusion and tables being thrown and punches and then Chebukati was hit. That was well planned. There was forces behind trying to interfere with our process. And I'm glad that institutions held, a few individuals did what was right to make sure the country does not descend. You can disagree with an announcement or the outcome, but you don't have to cause our country to descend into chaos and confusion. So in a nutshell, what happened in Bomas was the interference, but also there was resilience. So individuals and systems and institutions withheld the pressure of interference. People stood their ground, said, no, we'll call it as it is, we'll do what is right. Okay? So I'm glad it happened. It shouldn't have happened ideally, but I think it showed that as a country, we're maturing and we're coming out of this age. Like I said, if that happened any other time in the history of our country, that will be enough to ignite and blow up this whole place. So one of the things that we had decided, especially the political class and the supporters, the people, we said that if for some reason you disagree with the results, there's a process. Okay, you don't have to descend. Well, one of the challenges when you look at our roadmap to election, we have 3 of them, was a culture of violence, whereby dissent is through violence, not through the means, the rule of law. So we said, and to the political class and to the supporters, if you dissent, if you disagree, well, follow the process, go to court. And I'm glad that they did follow the process because, okay, you don't trust the IBC. Okay, our courts have shown that they're very independent. So that was very important. In 2017, the Supreme Court overturned the presidential election. That's how independent they are. So if you don't like the IBC, it's okay, say fine, let's go to the court. So you should trust the court process, okay? Now, we saw the submissions that were submitted to court, and when the petitions came, I was a little bit concerned, to be frank with you. I was a little bit concerned with what was, I would say, submitted in the petitions. Why? Because we had a front row seat to this election. We knew certain facts to this election. And when I saw some of the submissions, the petitions, are like, I'm not sure people really know what's going to happen. Because remember that week I told you between after election and the time it was announced, so what happened was, first of all, both sides claimed they had won initially, especially the day after. And we reached out to both sides, says, you can't have finished tallying the day after. I mean, we still have numbers coming from different constituencies of the country. There's no means practically could have finished. So we reached out to both sides, and one side decided actually to listen and call their troops off. Now, what happened was there was constant disinformation and misinformation that whole week of one side saying they have won. As me was like, well, we have won. So they repeated that over and over to their supporters, to their leaders, even genuine leaders, key leaders in the country believe they had won. So now come to the submission to the court, certain things were presented, knowing certain facts we knew not true. So I'm here perplexed. I'm like, hold on, do you know what you're presenting actually is factually not true? Now, of course, the Supreme Court ruled there are 9 issues they're considering, and all of the 9 issues were all dismissed because it was just not factual. And to me, it shows our contention, especially with Facebook and social media, and the role they play, critical role they play in democracy in Africa. Okay? Because why people believed what they believed was because the constant repetition of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. Okay, there's nobody to say, guys, this is not it. And of course, they had a whole IBC. Challenge had that whole time, that gap and that silence gave way and room for people to come up with all kinds of things. Now, when the Supreme Court ruled, they were not happy, of course. Azimi was not happy they lost. They still contended. But I'm glad that at least they followed and they respected the court decision. And if just think about it, 9 out of 9 items, all of them, 9 out of 9, it wasn't 1 out of 9, it was 9 out of 9. The same Supreme Court, most of the justices in the court were there in 2017. So they know this, they've been down actually on this rodeo, their first rodeo to ride. Actually, some of them have been, this is their 3rd election they're judging on. So this was the first rodeo. So if I'm objective, I would say the Supreme Court called it right. 100%, because those facts were undeniable. Whether your side lost or not is a fact that a second adjudicator, in football language, let's put it this way, the VAR, confirmed the first call. So the VAR is final, and if it confirms the first call, it is. So to me, that's okay. If I used to borrow that language, the VAR was correct and the judgment was correct at the first call. Let me give each the Supreme Court. You see, for a long time, in my view, the only independent and functioning arm of government was the judiciary, especially between 2013 and 2022. How the Constitution was framed was that each arm of government was supposed to counter-check the other arm. So the executive is checked and held accountable by the judiciary or the legislative, so on and so forth, the legislative arm of government, which is the National Assembly, and the Parliament. Parliament was largely compromised and they just did not do their oversight role properly. So the last bulwark to our democracy, the last check, the last defense we had, the rule of law, was the judiciary. And they proved their independence. Of course, it's not perfect. We have issues. Let's just face it. That's just a fact. But overall speaking, there are challenges too in financing and so many and so forth. But for the most part, the last hope we had as a country was the judiciary, which the Supreme Court is part of. And that's why what they did on them ruling on the Supreme Court ruling on the 2022 election was, if you're a Kenyan, you really understood where we've come as a country. To me, they proved over and over what they have done for the past 10 years, being independent, being the last hope for us as Kenyans. They came through. So for me, one of the silver linings, or the key takeaways I can say, was in African democracy, in large context. Sometimes we just focus on the election itself, but there's an environment they operate. So that, to me, I look at the legal framework, okay, and for me, the legal framework and legislation has enabled our democracy to flourish. That is what has given it. And when you have now a functioning institution like the judiciary, you become a custodian and a guardian of what democracy ought to be. So to me, they played a critical role in being a guardian and a custodian to our democracy. And that's largely also why we have peace, because it is not just one call. See, we look at that Supreme Court ruling, but you have to look at in whole, in context. Throughout that, they have been the guardians, and they still did that part that day. Not true. I think that was very perplexing and quite incredible, as you asked me. But also, on the flip side, it was a good thing. Why? So let me start with the positive first, because ultimately, what is considered is the position of the whole as a commission. So IBC called the election for the then deputy president, now the president. And that was the position of IBC. They called those numbers. In the ruling of the Supreme Court, those numbers were withheld as it was called. So that's a good part. Now let's look at the reality, and why ask me why they split. Back to the reality of what happened in Burma, still context. Just quite simply put, interference. Okay. The reality is, we in our positions, in high positions in government, you always have pressure to do one or two things. We're political appointees, and the powers that be would want you to do lobby or put pressure or persuade you to do one or two things that is favorable to it. And it's understandable. But the truth of the matter, especially as far as our law is concerned in our country, is we as public servants, the state officers, we're custodians. Okay? We hold it in trust. We hold our positions in trust. You took an oath, I took an oath to uphold our constitution, to protect our constitution, to do what is right before God and before the whole country. And you must, at one point, decide to stand for what is right and protect the Constitution, regardless of political pressure, regardless of who's telling you to do one or two things. And that's what happened, was because the division that you saw, the split that you saw, was because there was a lot of interference and pressure to try to change the results as we saw it, to try to alter it. And as much as you can be put to that pressure, because IBC has always under been that constant pressure. There's always been, since time immemorial, every alteration of IBC, because under Constitution now it's IBC, prior to that was a different name, and every alteration of it has always been under a lot of pressure. And what happened was just simple pressure, and there are people, individuals, that one side decided to cave into the pressure. And that's why you saw that split, rather than just do what was right. When you saw that division, of course, so let's look at who was right, and at the end of the day, who's right, who's wrong. Because neither of them could be right, neither can be wrong. And I look at the Supreme Court ruling. Of course, whether issues, internal issues, maybe leadership, you can contend that. But I can tell you, I spent a lot of time with those commissioners. I know all of them personally. And they're my friends. Professionally, we are colleagues. Because of elections, because we had to do, of course, we spent a lot of time. I was in Bombers, like I said, every single day. I know them personally. And I sympathize and empathize to an extent, because we go through the same process. We live in the same space. But at one point, you have to say no. At one point, you have to be allowed to do your job, okay? And when you're forced to do something that is, is categorically and not right, or not even close to right, at all points again, it's just not possible. I know what they're being told to do, and it's just not possible. So they should have just stood and said, what, this is what we should do. Now, guess what? Prior to the Supreme Court, or because of our role as a commission, of course, is we mediate, I was appointed to do some shuttle diplomacy between those two factions of within IBC. And not just we as a commission, but also the Interreligious Council of Kenya. So together we're trying to mediate both sides. And I know them personally, so of course, first time it was easy to get access. So I went to the first and I listened to their issues. I went to this other faction, listened, and I tried to mediate. And you know what was significant about it? What was strange was, at that time, back to perception, what you said, at that time, people were so dug in, people were so entrenched on their positions. It was so hard to find a common ground, especially the four. I could try to persuade them, listen, you're still part of the IBC. This is a commission, so you all need to have a unified position. Especially, okay, what they did was in Serena was wrong. But to me, the main thing was you cannot go to the court and individually you respond different to how IBC is responding, because they were named as respondents. And they should have just been all one institution, because I said, it's just bad. It's bad for you. It's bad for the perception. It's bad. So what happened in Serena, but now you have an opportunity to fix it. All of you belong to the IBC, and IBC already called this. So you stand for that. You can disagree internally, but just stand for that. And that was not heeded. But at least we made efforts to try to bring them together. I can tell you that we did that. I think the future is bright. It's hopeful. In this sense, one time I was on TV and I was doing an interview, and I said, as much as a lot of effort and attention is on the 2022 election, for me, I was looking at least 50 to 100 years from now. Because I believed that if we do this transition peacefully, then we've set a foundation for the future, for progeny. That if you do it right now, should have shown the future generation that you can actually do it right. You can do it. So I wasn't just looking at now, I was looking at 50 years from now. And now to do what needs to be done now for future generations. And I think, to be truthful to you, that's what has lacked in Africa, the ability to look in the future, to be strategic. And sometimes when you're strategic, you have to, for lack of a better word, lose now to gain later. You have to remove expediency from your equation. Because oftentimes expediency is what is good for now. And that's what for us we said, let's look at the future. So for me, the future looks good because there's certain things we ingrained and embedded within the process of democracy, within the election, that if practiced and continued and perfected will be good. Now, that's not to say we're out of the woods yet. You know why? But guess what? Because in 2002, in this country, we had, again, the most peaceful election. 5 years later, we descended into chaos. So, why? Because the vigilance was lost. I have a favorite saying. My favorite saying is this: the day after the battle is as important as the day before the battle. The same vigilance, the same preparations that you did, is the same that you continued. You don't lose your vigilance. In the military, they call hypervigilance. You maintain that status because the threat will still be there. There's still threats to democracy, internal and external. We don't lose it. It's not automatic. Guess what? We just saw it in the U.S. 2 years ago. After 200 years of democracy, it was under threat. Nobody actually could even fathom that. Yeah. So we never lose the focus. So as much as to me the future looks good, the more important part is not to lose the vigilance. Okay, the focus. It is hard because we can say, okay, now we are good, but we're not losing it. For us, as a commission, for me personally, we're not losing. We're keeping the focus, keeping vigilance. The same effort we did is the same effort until the time when we can become almost automatic, for lack of a better word. So let me start from where you've stopped. For the first time, we saw largely to an extent the discourse and the narrative, and mobilization not along ethnic lines, but issue-based, okay? Now, to the earlier point which you said, so I can combine both. You see, the reality is, for a long time, that's why you have 89 political parties plus, which is 90-something probably by now, is political parties in Kenya are special purpose vehicles, SPVs. Only for the elections. So they don't stand for anything, actually. They're there just to win elections. And after that, let's move to the next thing. That's the challenge we've had, politically speaking. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because sometimes we look at the West where there's clear ideology with the West, you're left or right-leaning, so you can pretty much know. We don't have to emulate it, but the principle ought to be that you stand for something specific that can be identified as a party. Now, we've never had that as a country. And that is why we had so many parties, and most of them actually just along ethnic enclaves and divisions. It's a reality. Then because there are many, and because they don't stand for anything, that's when it forces you to have coalitions. However, let me just say as a pointer, as a good thing, and I love giving credit where it's due. Especially the Kenya Kwanza, then called Tangatanga. For them, they had a very clear mantra, the bottom up. And they were criticized for it. They were ridiculed for it. But guess what? It was something. Okay? It was an ideology. It was an economic model they wanted to stand on. So whether you disagree with them or not, you have to give credit where it's due. The fact is, they shifted the discourse from ethnic mobilization to issue-based, where it's the economy. Remember 92 Bill Clinton, it's economy stupid. It's the same thing. To them it was, this is what we are advocating for. It forced, for the most part, as me also to change and see that our politics wasn't just ethnic based, it was also not just ethnic based, but it was also individual centered. So it elevated the individual. So it forced the Azimio then to change their messaging, to start talking about issues that affect Kenyans every single day. The high cost of living, high unemployment, inequality, which is a good thing for our country. Now, my advice to our government is what they stood for is what made people vote for them. They should not change that. So be very consistent so that it becomes now the rallying call and your foundation to what you stand for and stand on as a party and of course as a government, because that's your manifesto. You propagated it and you want people to choose you based on it. Now, Vision 2030 is very clear that we ought to be, as a country, for us to move into a middle income level, we have to have a people-centered, okay, issue-based politics, okay, because it is individual-centered. So we're seeing that moving slowly, and I think it's a good thing. So I give credit to our current president. It was really difficult. On another thing, just that I remember. You see, the reason why. Now back to the second part of your question of ethnicity. It never used to be like that. So there's two or three things we need to understand. Generational reality. So prior to 07, 08, the millennials, which I'm part of, didn't have an ethnic identity. Largely because many things were changing. Globalization was here. And then as a country, the dynamics within us as a country was really changing fast. Okay, people are moving to the cities. Therefore, your last name or your surname was just to identify you from X, Y, and Z. It wasn't an identity issue. Now, our parents' generation, your surname was an identity, so it told you what ethnic group you belong to, and that was your identity. So millennials changed that. We changed that up until 07, 08. I remember I was out of the country. I was, 11,000 miles away in a different continent. And even Kenyans there were divided and stopped talking to each other. I know friends, best friends, who one was Kalenjin and Kikuyu, stopped talking to each other. I know churches which split, literally. I mean, I know people died here, but I'm talking about 11,000 miles because the issue of identity came across, because that ethnic identity was awakened. It became the only differentiating. You're Kikuyu, you're Kalenjin, you're Luo, you're Kisi, you're Luya, and that's your identity. Okay, so the national identity was lost, and it took a lot of effort, and slowly but surely we're still getting there. I don't think we are out of the woods yet. I don't think also yet, because our constitution says we ought to respect our diversity, that we are different groups, but we have strength in diversity. Can we move that? Yes, we can move only when our identity is based. We are Kenyan first. I'm not Kikuyu, I'm not Luo, I'm not Somali. I am Kenyan first, who speaks a different language. And I appreciate somebody from a different community, because I see them first of all as Kenyans, secondly, as they come from a different community. Hopefully we can get there, but we can. I mean, we've seen countries in Africa who've moved from ethnic identity to nationhood identity. So I get a call on Saturday at around 9 p.m. I think it was. I'm told things are not very good at Bomas. The previous day, we had disturbances. We had people try to cause some chaos here and there. So the security had installed some certain measures. For example, they had banned politicians from coming in. So I was at an event actually. I was still gonna go to Bomas, but I needed to stop at a family event. I get a call. I'm told, I think you need to be in Bomas. So I rush straight up to Bomas. I go to the VIP. So the VIP room was almost right behind the stage. So when you look at Bomas, right behind the stage. I get there, I find the Swiss ambassador, and I find Reverend Mutia, who's the chair of the ARC. It's a religious council of Kenya. We have a small chat back and forth, and then they depart. I was hungry, get some food. Then the chairman, Mr. Chebukati, and a few of the commissioners come in on the room. They will take breaks, so they're taking a break. Around now it's about 10 o'clock. I sit down opposite him, we do our food, and as we're about to eat, I already finished eating. And as they're eating, I was taking coffee, I remember, we hear some commotion on the floor. So there's always a time delay between live TV, what you see, there's about a 3-second delay always on TV. Then we look on the screen because the TV was on, and we look. A whole bunch of people have breached the floor, the counting floor of bombers, and we're very concerned. So Mr. Chebukati calls for the head of security at that time. Bombers was IG, Deputy IG, Nur Gabo. So he calls him in the off when we're eating. There's about a small room, not too big, but about 8 in that room. Calls him, and the rest of the commissioners are in, apart from one who was in the floor, doing the process of which the IBC was doing. So we started to discuss security measures, what we need to do, what can be done. So everybody's trying to think on the floor, think quick. Then as we're about to decide what to do, and Gabo is being given instruction, now the real breach happens. You can see people coming in, you can see people forcing the barriers, taken down. Then Gabo is told, you know what, you need to secure this floor immediately now. Do whatever needs to be done. I'll call in the anti-riot police. So that's why you saw now what you call the Ant-Men came in with the full riot gear and secured the floor. So we have to make a quick decision. And this is why it was critical for some of us to be there, just to give independent, objective advice. Because when you're under intense pressure, and you remember, what you remember, people don't forget, is the frame of mind, psychologically speaking, especially for key people who are there. They've been there pretty much from the Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They were not sleeping. They were sleeping like 2 hours, 3 hours, I can tell you that, because practically with them all the time. So you try to function 3 days in a row staying without sleep. Now you can imagine almost a week now. It's Saturday. So there's a debate between what needs to be done. Now, why I'm saying this is important is because Saturday evening was a harbinger of what was going to happen on Monday. Because there's now the clear division of what needs to be done. That there was a side that says, we need to suspend. One of the commissioners comes and says we need to suspend the tallying right now. So we look at each other. I said, I don't think this is a smart idea. The chairman said, also that's a smart idea. I step out of the meeting. I get a brief from one of our peoples of what is really happening behind the scenes. So I came back and told the chairman, Mr. Chairman, listen to me very carefully. In my experience, especially in conflict, because we're always in conflict, chaos, because it seems chaotic and just random, it is always planned. So there's something happening that you don't know, but I've been informed what's happening, but you cannot afford to suspend the tallying, because that was the crux of the matter, to suspend the tallying. So I said, well, the best thing is the CEOs has listened. First of all, secure your materials, because the ROs had the original files of 34As, and that was the most crucial documents. So I said the first thing is secure the floor, which we have. Then the ROs need to secure those files, because there's also an attempt to steal those files. No matter what happens, the RO must even die with that file. Then one of the commissioners suggested, well, we need to go do tallying in a different place altogether. I say, no, that will breach the law, actually, because for you to tally, it has to be with party agents and observers and monitors. It has to be public, so nobody can say elections were stolen. Because now if you do that, if you go to a different room and take your arrows and do the tallying, guess what? Now you'll be accused of actually rigging these elections, the election. I said, no. The fact, the thing is to secure the floor. So what was important? What we discovered? What I saw, then this is important. What happened on Saturday night was a high binge of what happened on Monday. That was what to come. There was a clear division between what we need to do in terms of continuing with the process. Should we stop? Should we suspend? Should it be done in a different place? And the division was clear. But more important also was the forces behind it. That's why I'm getting this story, because what I realized later was this was a well-arranged plan to try to change or actually push the announcement so that it goes beyond Tuesday, because Tuesday was the deadline when the chair could have announced the president election. And that was quite concerning. Now, the other thing actually was highlighting also was on Wednesday morning, and I think I've spoken it again, but on Wednesday morning after the election, I remember I'd been up the whole night. I get a call. I only slept for 2 hours from our situation room. We had a massive situation room. We had an MMU, media monitoring unit, that was monitoring everything. So from your traditional media to online or social media. So I get a call and I'm being told, well, social media is lit up. So I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, well, both sides actually are claiming they have won. So I look at the report. I go and check for myself. I'm looking at Twitter. I'm like, oh, this is not good. And also it's good. We had channel communications to of course to both sides. And since I was the one in charge of Nairobi, I had to go and reach out to it. And this is what I told both sides. It's very easy for you to ban this country by saying such things this early, because both of you are claiming I've won. And it's easy for you to incite your supporters to believe that. Then what happens if the results that come officially are different? Which exactly that is exactly what happened. What's going to happen to your supporters? And so I'm looking at back the role that of course it's a political season, it's propaganda, but also we also need to be mature to an extent. And I'm glad at least. The cons actually really heeded to my advice. Really did. I called the guys behind, and they heeded. And actually, for the most part, they kept quiet the whole week, even on Monday. Because even behind the scenes, one of the things that was happening in Bombers, I mean, you saw me back and forth on the phone, and especially in the hand on the stage, is actually trying to appeal to the leaders on both sides, to keep calm. Like I would call or engage those who are on the alliance and hold your supporters, because. Can you imagine if both sides responded and reacted? It's only one side will have happened in the country. So I think for me, it's good to have restraint, even when you're provoked. One of the most important thing I realize is the power of restraint. When you're provoked, because if you respond, if you react, you fall into a trap. And that's why even I was telling the chair on Saturday, if you do something, there's a trap that is being set, and you can easily fall into this trap if you don't watch it. So be measured, be circumspect as you respond to this. On Saturday? Well, he did. So this is what happened. Okay, by law, of course, you're given protection. You have a bodyguard and a driver and all that stuff. So the protection was there, but the threat level assessment wasn't commensurate with the protection that was given, because nobody foresaw that bombers can be breached and his life can be in danger right there. So you expect somebody's life to be in danger out there, okay, but not in a very secure. This is, how many police officers were in bombers? We had specialized units. We had regular police, GSU, RDU. We had highly specialized units securing that place. So you don't imagine that is the place you can be in most danger, in a sense. But yes, there was a lot of danger. Guess what? I mean, IBC commissioners, especially on, I think after Thursday was something happening Friday, and I told them, you know what, I wouldn't advise you to go home. So they were sleeping in bombers on the couches. Can you imagine? They'll spend the whole night sleep in the couch. Maybe now during the days when they rush home, shower, and come back, because that's how dangerous things were. I mean, literally, we saw it. So there was security, but not enough given threat level. Now, after Monday, his security actually was beefed up, because the threat level, of course, was even higher than ever before. Now, half the country is upset and mad at him. Of course, what do you expect? Anybody can do something stupid. Yeah, so it was beefed up to an extent. But looking back, yeah, it was something else. It was quite a roller coaster ride. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
This is tense.
Yeah. You see, when you're in the mix, sometimes there is I think it was who was it? The American president, FDR, Roosevelt, who wrote The Man in the Arena. And when you're in the mix, I like the NFL, and you have the vantage point when you're watching at home. Sometimes the quarterback does something that is really stupid, throws an interception. Then you tell yourself, I saw that. Well, because you're on the TV, you can see what he can see, but position determines perspective. And when you're in the mix, really in the mix of it, you just have to trust God you're making the right call, because the pressure is intense. I can tell you that backstage right before it was breached, and we were really trying to make calls, trying to put measures to stop the country not to go to the brink. I mean, I can tell you we were this close. It was this close. So we really trying to push back, and I would say this: the guardrails of democracy held. You see, guardrails are there so that when there's pressure, so it will come. And what you saw on TV, that was the pressure coming against the guardrails that we had set in place, in motion. So the cause that the discussion we're having behind the scenes, you can see us moving back and forth on stage, is really trying to secure the guardrails to make sure, we could see pressure was coming, and making sure that our country holds. And I'm glad the guardrails of democracy actually did hold, and we're grateful. Thank God for that. Yeah.